We continue the shiur in Gemara. The Gemara says there's a pasuk, a sentence in the Torah, from which we learn that before anybody is appointed to a high rank, a high office, it must first be consented to, agreed upon, decided in heaven. Heaven decides before any person receives a promotion of any rank, no matter how small or how great. Before a king is crowned, before it's decided that a king should be crowned, or that the head of government should be chosen in an election, there is first a decision made in heaven. When that decision is made, it doesn't matter how much campaigning there is for the election, how much effort each one puts into getting this high office. It is already decided in heaven that this person is going to win out, and nothing on earth can change it. Not only that, the Gemara says that even the smallest office, which means, for example, the head of, there's a ditch digging group. They dig ditches to get water, wells. And there's one person who is the foreman, the head of this group. Before the foreman is appointed as head of that group, the lowest type of group, sanitation department even, that's first okayed in heaven, sealed in heaven. The reason the Gemara tells us this, what the Gemara needs to point out is that, like the Rambam says, the old days, the people worshipped idols. Why did they worship idols? After all, they saw. It's obvious. A person who has any sense could see, could detect that there is a creator. The sun shines by day, the moon at night, the rains come. It's obvious. Any child can understand that there is a creator, a supreme being in heaven that directs all this. We're not speaking about people who are insane or semi-insane, who don't believe at all. Those are not considered people, they're considered animals. Animal sense. But even those who have a lot of sense, a lot of intelligence, as in the olden days when people were much wiser than they are today, everyone believed in Hashem. If they did, how come there was idol worship? The answer is that these people believed in Hashem, but they believed that Hashem was so great that it was beneath his dignity to have to supervise matters that are so low. Hashem is the king of the heavens, the king of all the angels, the vast intricacies of the universe. So Hashem would not bother with small items. And therefore they felt there must be someone in between. Well, for example, a soldier has to give the highest respect to his commanding officer, who might be a lieutenant or a captain. And though this captain is far below a colonel, or surely below a general in rank, still this private must give his due respect to his commanding officer, the captain. And this is what these people felt, that there is a power as an intermediary between Hashem and between people in this low world, lowest of worlds. But this was the error, an error that's so serious that it is classified as idol worship. Because Hashem in his greatness, his infinite greatness, is so great that he could supervise not only the highest of the heavens, highest of the worlds with all the super angels there, but also the lowest of the lowest world. Every single item, every individual on earth is seen and watched over by Hashem himself. No intermediary at all. Hashem sees all that is happening, all that is done by the smallest of people. Nothing escapes his sight, and nothing escapes his decision. This applies not only to humans, but also to animal life, and also to vegetation, even to inorganic life, even to that which is inorganic. If there is a pebble that falls, it is because Hashem wanted it to happen. This is called hashgacha prati. We once mentioned that the Baal Shem Tov gives an example of this. His students asked him, could you explain hashgacha prati, individual supervision by Hashem? And everything that happens in the world is the will of Hashem. The Baal Shem Tov replied, certainly, I'll show you a clear example of this. He took them out to the woods. He showed them that the wind was blowing there, and because of the wind blowing, a leaf fell off a tree. He said to them, this tree has thousands of leaves on it, and here one single leaf fell off a tree. Did that leaf fall because at that very moment Hashem wanted the leaf to fall, made it fall? The answer is certainly so. And what is the reason for exactly that leaf falling at the spot where it fell? And he said, let's observe further. Again, a breeze came up, and it blew this leaf. They followed the path of this leaf until it came to an isolated corner of the woods, where there it stopped. And there, at that point, they found there was a tiny worm who was crippled, too small to move, and would have starved to death. Hashem provides food, nourishment for every living thing. Hashem made this breeze come up, blow this leaf over to this tiny worm, so that this worm could be nourished, could be fed. This tiny worm was seen, watched over by Hashem. This leaf fell off the tree because Hashem wished it so, and this applies to every single thing that happens on earth. There is nothing that ever takes place, that ever transpires without the will of Hashem behind it. Except, of course, one item that Hashem leaves to the human beings themselves. He does not direct this, he does not force this to happen, and that is the actions of a Jew, the actions of a human. A person wishes to be good, to do a good deed, he is not forced to do so by Hashem. A person commits a crime, it's not because Hashem willed it and made this happen. This is called bechira, or free choice. In this one case only, Hashem gives leeway to humans. You have a choice, this is up to yourself. So, therefore, if a person does mitzvot, he is entitled to reward. It's not that he was forced to do it, it's not that it came from heaven. He did it on his own, he deserves reward. If a person commits a sin, he cannot say that this was the will of heaven, he could not help it. He commits a sin, it was his own action, and therefore he certainly deserves receiving punishment for it. And this is called bechira, free choice, aside from everything else which is hashgacha prati, individual supervision. Now, Agav, by the way, this item of hashgacha prati, there are some authorities in the past who seem to dispute this. Certain sfarim written by great authorities in the past who do not agree with this point, but these are the philosophers of the past, and therefore we are warned constantly by the great tzaddikim, up to including the time of Arizal, that we must ignore the writings of these philosophers. One of the basic tenets of our faith is to believe in hashgacha prati, believe in the infinite greatness of Hashem, and Hashem sees all and supervises all, no matter how tiny, how infinitely tiny an item may be. That's one of the sodot emunah, the foundations of faith. The Gemara says that Rabbi Yochanan, who was the chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael, spoke once reminiscing, recalling the past. And he said, I recall how past generation was so much better than we were. Every generation gets worse. We note that throughout the eras in history, as generations go by, people become lower, both in mentality and lower in goodness, greatness. The rabbis of 2,000 years ago were much greater than those of 1,500 years ago. Those of 1,500 years are greater than those of 1,000 years ago. those of 100 years ago were much better than those of our present day. And imagine what the next generation is going to be like, if they'll be even still worse. But this is the tendency of the world to deteriorate. You see the world itself. Imagine what this world looks like today. The lack of justice, the lack of morals compared to what it was only 25 or 30 years ago. So even at that time, Yochanan said, I recall, how much better the world was a short time ago. Because it was better, there was a much greater amount of shefa, blessing. He said, I recall when a child would take a fruit, a kiruv, so it's a buxer. A buxer is a very dry fruit. And he said there was so much shefa, blessing in this, that as he would eat this kiruv, then the honey that would drip from this kiruv would drip down on both of his arms. So much blessings were there in the fruit in those days. And this has been diminished until our time, says Rabbi Yochanan. Yochanan also said, to show the difference, the moral values, righteousness of the past, he said, I recall that there was a time when they had a boy and girl, 16 or 17 years old, who would walk together in the street, and there was no sin committed, neither in action nor in thought. The age for marriage is 18. Therefore, the boy should not see a girl. There should not be any dating, as is the Hebrew law. A boy is never allowed to date a girl until he is ready for marriage, until he is seeking a mate. But just for the sake of dating, for the sake of companionship, is wrong because it brings to bad thoughts. It results in evil deeds for a boy and girl to go together. Yochanan said, I recall a time when it was possible that a boy and girl at that age, just prior to marriageable age, could walk together, and they were so pure then, the world was so filled with morality, that there was no problem at all of bad thoughts on their part. If Rabbi Yochanan said that in his time, that the world had deteriorated at that time with a lack of morals, imagine what the subsequent generations brought about. Imagine what kind of a generation we are living in now, and how careful a person should be not to get burnt by having any association that is not fully legal. Legal means where a person is sincere about his intentions. If he's out to get married, then he is justified in seeing a girl for the sake of object matrimony. Just for the sake of enjoying yourself, pastime with a girl, this is definitely sinful. It might be a small sin just speaking to a girl, but this can lead to thought can lead to words, and words can lead to actions. These actions could contaminate his entire soul. Therefore, what our advice is that a person should keep himself holy at all times. Rabbi Yochanan said also, I recall, when this was said in the yeshiva, meaning this was said by our rabbis, and this lesson applies to all time. A very vital lesson, important bit of advice that every Jew should take to heart. This lesson was, the statement was, that anybody who admits to a goyim on any topic whatsoever that they are right, or agrees with the goyim that they are right, when there is a controversy, an argument, a debate about any item between the goyim and Jews, if he wants to flatter them, if he wants to find favor in their eyes by telling them they are right, this type of flattery can cause his downfall. He is assured that they will not accept him as a friend because he agrees with them, but that they will eventually destroy him. What is a person required to do? in a case where there is a debate or controversy between Jews and Goyim, you must stick to your point regardless. You must show them that you will never compromise on any issue. That which we believe in firmly, and we will hold by our beliefs regardless of how we are outnumbered or regardless of what claims they may have to the contrary. This will result in a higher degree of respect of the Jews by the Goyim themselves, even though they find that Jews disagree with them. Because the Goyim maintain, they insist, that they do not want a Jew to join their ranks. The Goyim do not want Jews to agree with them, to join them, to accept their ideas. They'd rather stay separate from us, just as the Jews feel they should stay separate from Goyim and their ideas too. The Talmud Yerushalmi tells of a case where a king once said to Rabbi Nachman, I have here unkosher food. I command you to eat this unkosher food. If you don't, I will kill you. By Hebrew law, a Jew is not supposed to die for his religion unless it entails committing one of three sins. If a Jew is commanded to worship idols, he must die rather than to worship the idols. Or if a Jew is commanded to murder somebody, to commit murder, he is supposed to die rather than to kill the other person. Or if a Jew is commanded to commit adultery or any similar type of sin of zanut, illegal relations with any woman, he must die rather than commit that sin. Aside from that, any other mitzvah in the Torah, like Shabbat, it's a question of life and death, he may break the Shabbat. His life comes first. It's a question of unkosher food. If he's sick and must have the unkosher food to save himself, he's not supposed to die. He is supposed to eat the unkosher food. In this case, the king commanded him to eat unkosher food or be killed. The legal answer to that is that he should have said, fine, I'll eat it. Instead, he said, I refuse to eat it, and I will not, even if you kill me. This was not his requirement. A Jew, of course, is not required to do that, but he is permitted to. If he wants to be that strict, individually by himself, to die for the sake of a small mitzvah, he may do it, but he is not considered guilty of the sin of committing suicide. There is a difference between a mitzvah that is compulsory and one that is optional. It is compulsory for a Jew to die if one of those three major laws are involved. It is not compulsory for any other mitzvah, but it is optional, he may. In this case, Rabbi Nachman chose to die rather than to commit the sin of eating unkosher. When he replied to the king that he would rather die, the king told him, in that case then, you're going to live, but you will not eat this food. Because I just fooled you. I told you, eat this or I'll kill you. If you would have eaten this unkosher food, then I would have killed you. Why? The king said, because as Goyim, he was a Roman king. He said, either we maintain if you're a Roman, be a Roman. If you're a Jew, be a Jew. That's what this Roman king said. A Jew should be a Jew, a Roman should be a Roman. If this was said by a Goy, imagine how much stronger a Jew should feel about that. You're a Jew, you made a Jew, and never show inferiority to Goyim by admitting to them, showing that you believe in what they say and that they are right. So if a person ever bows to the ideas of Goyim and shows that, implies that they are right, it will be he'll fall into their hands and they will destroy him. Also, these same rabbis in the yeshiva said, anybody who has faith in Goyim, feeling that if he accepts their friendship and shows a bitachon, reliance upon the the goy being his ally, the result will be that this goy will accept his friendship and his faith, and then he'll steal everything the Jew has. He'll take everything away from him. You cannot trust the goyim. By the way, this applies not just to goyim, both of these statements. This applies also to the sha'im, those who are wicked, meaning those who have no faith in Hashem, those who are opposed to Torah, opposed to what is right, the criminal element. They cannot be trusted at all, and if you do trust them, you will find that you lose out with them completely, because you rely upon them and they will stab you in the back eventually. This was the lesson that the rabbis of the yeshiva told rabbis of Yochanan. He said this lesson is one that should be taken to heart by every single person in the future too. The Gemara says there were two customs in Yerushalmi. These customs should be continued, handed down through generations also. One is a regular custom that pertains to caterers. Note that the Gemara has information of every type. There's no topic in existence that is not discussed in the Torah. Here, the Gemara speaks about caterers. In Yerushalmi, when they ordered someone to cater a feast, whether it was a wedding feast or another type of celebration, if the caterer was given the order, and then somehow the caterer, through a miscalculation on his own part, or through some negligence, harmed the meal, spoiled it, then besides the fact that the person who ordered this catered meal does not have to pay him for it, the caterer must also pay to this party the money for the amount of embarrassment that it caused him. Guests came to the meal, they found the food was spoiled. He's embarrassed. He must pay the money for embarrassment and the money for the embarrassment of the guests. A guest comes to a meal, he feels embarrassed for the sake of his host. This was a rule, a law, that this was the extent of the responsibility of the caterer. This, of course, resulted in feasts that were perfect. Perfect catering. No accidents can happen when a caterer knows the extent of his financial responsibility. And, of course, we could really apply this to many other cases, too. If we would have this type of insurance requirement the part of those who are hired out, part of any type of service, we can be sure that the services will be of the highest degree. The second custom that Yerushalmi taught us was something which we find very often many places today. This was, they originated the idea of a welcome mat placed in front of the door. But the welcome mat was not just an ordinary sign for welcome. This was placed in front of the door when there was food in the house for guests. The person had enough food to supply wayfarers, wanderers, or guests passing by. He would place this mat outside. People coming by would know they can come into this house for a meal. If they saw that the mat was missing, then they would not enter, because they know if they enter, they would embarrass the owner or the host. He doesn't have enough food around. This shows the quality of their hospitality to strangers, but also a manner, an act which would avoid any possible embarrassment to host or to guests. We should, of course, practice this, knowing that this is the description of Avraham Avinu, the first father of the Jews, who was known primarily for his hospitality to strangers. His home was always open. He had a house, a large mansion with opening doors on all four sides, in all four directions. A person coming from any direction could walk straight through that door and be assured of a meal, food, drink, and a place to sleep. The Vilna Gaon says, we mentioned this previously, it says, V'yita Esho that Avraham planted an Eshel. Eshel means a tree. But this refers to, the Midrash says, a haven for guests. Eshel stands for the three letters Achila, Shetiyah, and Lina. Food, drink, and a place to sleep over. This case happened once when there was a man who was very hospitable, and hospitality is a Gemilat Chasadim. It's a kindness which the Torah says is repaid by Hashem with wealth. Hashem makes that person wealthy, aside from the reward he has in Olam Haba, Gan Eden. This is why we find out that Avinu was so wealthy, the wealthiest person on earth. In this case, though, this man who had an open home for strangers had a fire that destroyed his entire home. He became a pauper. They asked the Molei Gaon, the chief rabbi of the world at that time, how could this happen to him? To be destroyed rather than to be blessed. And he said because this person did not fulfill the mitzvah in its entirety. He did give a guest achila and shtiyah, food and drink. He left out lina, place to sleep. Taking the lamed off the word eshel leads to the word esh, fire. And therefore he suffered destruction by fire. There's a lesson to him that if you do a mitzvah, it must be done completely. A mitzvah that is not complete is like a cripple. Cripple a mitzvah, and then there is the penalty to pay for it. Even it says we know that if we have to select one quality of all qualities that exist, good, of course, good qualities we know, but bad qualities, evil qualities, which is the worst one, the very worst that a person could acquire and that a person should strive to rid himself of completely. The worst quality that exists characteristic is ge'avah, haughtiness, conceit. This is one thing that is despised by Hashem, one thing where a person is considered is worse than avodah zarah, worshipping idols. For example, the Gemara says, the question is brought, there are two statements. One who loses his temper, kas, it is the same as avodah zarah, worshipping an idol, because he worships, he gives service to his temper. His temper rules over him, and that becomes his idol. So kas is so evil, it's like avodah zarah. Kas is so evil that it actually tears his neshama, his soul, to shreds. The person who has the sin of kas loses the mitzvot that he has. All the mitzvot too are torn apart. That's how serious kas is in avodah zarah. Secondly, even it says one who has ge'avah, conceit, this too is avodah zarah. Which of the two are worse? And the answer is that ge'avah is still worse. There's nothing that compares to ge'avah. This is the worst possible sin, because kas means he worships. It's like worshipping avodah zarah, idol worship. Ge'avah means that he worships himself. He himself becomes an idol. This is the worst type of sin. This comes in many forms. We have discussed many of them before. Previously, we've gone through many times. And here the Gemara adds one more point. There is ge'avah in a person wearing a garment that is not fit for himself. It's a certain type of garment that only a Talmid Chacham, a learned scholar, tzadik, should wear. And if a person is not fit to wear that garment, does put it on, but he is not a Talmid Chacham, then he is excluded from the presence of the Shekhinah in the future. The Mashiach comes, the person goes to heaven. If he has even this only one trace of ge'avah, or he puts on a garment that belongs to a Talmid Chacham, and he isn't one, he loses the chance of coming into Gan Eden, the circle of the purity Shabbat, who are close to Hashem. This garment we're speaking of, the Gemara says, is a special garment that was worn by Talmidei Chachamim in the past, which we find today too. This refers to a long coat. Note that the more religious Jews do not wear short jackets, they wear long coats, generally black coats of length, that are where the jacket is as long as our coats. But that's the normal. There are some who are much longer. They reach the ankles. These are the special Talmidei Chachamim. The Chachamim will have this long special coat. And this is fit only for a Chacham to wear. One who is not a Talmid Chacham is forbidden to wear that, because that means that he is cloaking himself, masking himself in a garment that would seem to imply that he is a Talmid Chacham. It's like a person wearing an officer's uniform when he is not. He's a private. Impersonating an officer is a crime. In this case, a person who impersonates Talmid Chacham is so serious a crime that he is refused admission into the inner circle close to Hashem. So even this seemingly small item, as long as it refers to Ga'avah, that's serious that its penalty is so far-reaching. Got to be done. We should learn to acquire humbleness, because those who are humble are the ones that do come close to Hashem. As the Gemara tells us, Arizal says that what does Hashem want of a person is humbleness. The more humble a person is, the more assured, guaranteed is he to enter into Gan Eden forever. Gan Eden in heaven, and even Gan Eden on earth. While alive, a person too can have Gan Eden here. He can have a life that is equivalent to paradise itself. A life of happiness, a life of joy, complete satisfaction. It is those who are humble that Hashem blesses with this joy and satisfaction. It might seem to us that a person is suffering. We think that we are more wealthy than they, we have more luxuries than they, and yet deep inside, that person feels a greater satisfaction, physical satisfaction, material satisfaction in life than the wealthiest of people. As, for example, you take an ordinary person, a Jew who's very poor and very humble. And this Jew sits down to his table Friday night, the candles lit, the wine on the table, and his meager meal, soup, meat, chicken, which is small compared to the luxurious culinary delicacies of the wealthy. To him, this is much more delicious, enjoyable than the richest of men. They can never feel that taste, that spice in their food, as does this humble poor man when he sits as a king at his table on Friday night. This is the material, physical satisfaction that a person can derive from life, even if he is poor, if he is humble. So the key to greatness, the key to perfection, the key to a life of happiness and enjoyment, this world and the next, is humility, humbleness, modesty. That's what we find that the greatest attribute of Moshe Rabbeinu was his modesty, his humbleness. This is what made him so great. And that's why, too, we find that going even still higher, we speak of the qualities of Hashem. Kaviyachol, Hashem, His kindness, His mercy, and all the other qualities. Above all, there is listed the humbleness of Hashem too. Greater Hashem is, the more humbleness He shows. We find this in the words of Hashem. Hashem says, I rule over all. I am king of the universe, king over all that exists. Everything is beneath me. I rule supreme. Who rules over me, Hashem says? And the answer, Hashem says, tzadikim. These small tzadikim, they seem so small, so light, so weak, an old man, bearded, fragile, poor, and yet he has the power that rules over Hashem. When Hashem decides something, to issue a decree against the individual, against the group, against the city, against the country, against the whole world. And this small, humble tzaddik prays to Hashem, insists that this decree be banished, be nullified. Hashem says, what can I do? The tzaddik has asked, he has demanded, he rules over me. not that tzadik is so powerful, greater than Hashem. This shows again the humbleness, kaviyachol of Hashem himself, and this is done to teach us also modesty and humbleness. The Gemara says there is a sefer called Ben Sira. We've had this many times in the Gemara. This is a sefer written by a son of Yirmiyahu Hanavi. And the sefer was not included among the book of the prophets, but it is quoted from often in the Gemara. The sefer was made with a number of statements, wise statements of proverbs, written in a proverbial fashion. Here the Gemara quotes, Ben Sina wrote, I weighed everything on a scale. All that I found in this world I weighed on a scale, and the lightest thing I found, we say light, of course, he means the most worthless thing I found, was what is known as subin. Subin is a type of bran flour, cheapest type of flour. This is the cheapest type of food possible. This is the lightest thing I found. Now, he said, this is the lightest. I found something lighter. I found something less worthy, or less valuable, or lower in form, meaning something which is evil. And that is a son-in-law who lives with his in-laws. Someone who lives with his in-laws, usually the first child married off by parents, the first daughter, then the mother-in-law, we speak about mother-in-law trouble, that generally refers to a mother-in-law to a daughter-in-law. We cannot confuse those two. Mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, the Gemara says, very rarely could get along. There might be exceptions in the world, of course. Speaking of a matter of general majority, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law do not get along at all. The Gemara tells actual stories in those days, and certainly how much more so today, the natural enmity that exists between the two. This is due to many reasons. We don't go into the psychological reasons that are given by today's psychiatrists or psychologists. It's simply a case of the mother-in-law being jealous of someone who took her son from her. However, we're speaking now about a mother-in-law and son-in-law. In this case, the opposite extreme exists. The mother-in-law enjoys having a son-in-law who has not taken a daughter from her. Rather, he emulates her husband. He is the protector for her daughter, the provider, and she feels a closeness to him. Now, this results in a benign act on her part, to the extent that she could squander her husband's money and give it to her son-in-law. If a son-in-law connives enough, this is not a crime school, but these are facts. If he would scheme, he could deceive his mother-in-law and get her to surrender most of the money she has or controls. This could put her husband or his father-in-law in a very bad financial position. This is one item that could happen if he lives there constantly, if he is a tenant boarder in the same home with his mother-in-law, which is called the house of his father-in-law. After all, it is his father-in-law's house, and yet, living there, he destroys his father-in-law's finances. That's one item. And secondly, of course, that might lead to something worse. It might lead to some type of illicit action between the mother-in-law and son-in-law, as a shalom, and that is why Ben Sina said, these are reasons for considering a chatan. The word chatan means bridegroom, and also means a son-in-law. Son-in-law who lives with in the house of his father-in-law is lower, is more base, more sordid, even in the quality of subin bread flour. Now, the The Gemara says subsequently, we must point this out, of course, Tosafot says that in later generations, times have changed. This refers to a long time ago. Nowadays, it has become more prevalent that couples do live with their in-laws. It is no longer a crime that it used to be, and because of the fact that it's more prevalent, that most of the evils have been eliminated. So that today, if couples live with their in-laws, it will not lead to these evil results that the Gemara describes. If, however, it is possible for a couple to be a little remote from their in-laws, of course they are still better off. There is still some truth left to the statement. The Metzina continues, as we said, I found that this type of act is so low, lower even than Sumin, but I have found something which is even worse than this. An act on the part of a person which is even worse than the case of a son-in-law living with his father-in-law's home. And this is the case of a guest who is invited to someone's home for a meal. And this guest has the audacity to bring along a friend with him. He was invited to this meal, and he should show appreciation for the act of his host. Instead, he brings along another friend, but it might embarrass the host who does not have enough to feed the additional person. If he is invited for a Shabbat meal, or even for a meal during the week, or even for an extended period, he has no right whatsoever morally to bring someone else without the permission of his host. And sometimes it is even embarrassing for him to request this, because if he's being invited and he'll say, "Can I bring along a friend?" the host, already having invited him, would feel reluctant to refuse, though he cannot afford it, although he would not enjoy it. He feels, "I'd like to have this person as my guest, not anyone else." So this this act is so low, so base for a guest to bring along another guest. This is considered even worse than the previous two items mentioned. There is a case point told in one of the tzadikim, one of the Sefarim, said as a joke, but there's a strong point involved, where a person came begging for a meal, begging. He went around those days going around begging for meals, and the owner of the house invited him in. When he came inside, this was an old man, he brought a young man with him, and the owner asked, "What right do you have to bring this young man with you?" He said, "I can't help it, because this young man is my son-in-law. When he got married, I promised him kest. Kest means that I would provide him with meals for a certain number of years. I'm responsible for him, so whatever I get, I've got to share with him." This is a case that is said as a joke, of course, but it is a true moral lesson in that this applies to everybody. A person who's invited, if he's not poor, he's a guest invited to someone's home, he should not bring along another guest unless the host implies that it will be all right in advance. Never to walk in with a second person. If he does, it's not an ordinary base act. It is so low that it's considered one of the worst acts possible. But Sina concludes that there is something even still worse than this, still lower. Lower than the past three items, the lowest thing of all, I find, Ben Sina says, is a person who, when a question is being presented, answers the question before it is asked. Before he hears the entire question, he jumps to answer the question. This means, this is not speaking about a rabbi and student relationship. This is speaking about two equals, two friends. The rabbi asks students questions. Of course, you have some who are anxious to answer this question. Or many times where a student asks, this can happen too, that the rabbi foresees the question being asked, they can answer it. If you have a group of friends who are all approximately at the same level, all are talmidim, or all are chachamim, in that case, one who leaps to answer a question before he hears the question thoroughly, that person is so low, so shameful, worse than the past item mentioned. The reason for this is reason that it's considered so based to answer to a question before you hear the entire question is, the Feder should explain it, Asha says, that it could happen that a person might hear only part of the question, might prejudge it, and might come out with the correct answer. This is possible at one time. There's nothing wrong with that. He happened to have the good fortune of foreseeing what the person was going to ask by just hearing a few words, and he came out with the right answer. Now, this is a matter of luck. This is like a blind person who walks and goes right to the window. With him, the window and the wall is the same. Matter of luck. So he blindly happened to hit upon the correct answer, or understood what the question would be. If this would happen to him once, the result would be then that afterwards he would feel that he is capable of doing this constantly. He'd get an impression of himself of such a superior nature that he knows what is in a person's mind. He has the power of reading other person's minds, and has the power of prejudging or telling, and being able to reply to the most difficult questions. In other words, this would lead to a ge'ava on his part. The result would be the extreme embarrassment for him, because he might leap out to answer something which in no way relates to what the question really is, and therefore, as Sina said, this is the lowest of all people, because he was fortunate at one time, but it'll end up in the worst type of shame, disgrace for himself. And this means then, very simply, that a person should think out very carefully any question that's placed to him, listen to it carefully, and study it, and then, after enough deliberation, to give the answer. The Gemara says, as a pasuk, if you are certain about the answer to a question, so certain there's no trace of doubt whatsoever in your mind, only then should you reply. If there's any doubt in your mind about the correctness of your reply, then withhold it until you are sure. This is very vital advice. The Gemara also says that you have to take your tongue and give it a lesson. Teach your tongue again and again. Learn how to say the words, I do not know. It's one of the healthiest words a person can know. teach you to say, I don't know, and you will never be embarrassed. If a question is placed before you, don't be afraid to say, I don't know. You cannot be caught with something wrong then. Plus, of course, this too teaches a person humbleness, humility. Even it says that there is a Kabbalah, which means we have received this from the Torah, this information, from our forefathers, handed down one after the other, that in the Bet HaMikdash, the Aharon Kodesh is the holy ark in which were placed the tablets that Moshe Rabbeinu brought down from heaven. This holy ark was placed in the Kodesh Kodashim. The Bet HaMikdash, the holy temple, consisted of a number of places there, each section, one being more holy than the other. The holiest place was called the room of the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies. In this room, the holy ark was placed in one wall, and the question is, what are the dimensions of this room? What is the dimension of the holy ark? What else was in that room besides the holy ark? Now we know that the holy ark was 2.5 cubits in length and 1.5 cubits in width. The room itself, the Holy of Holies, was exactly 20 amot. An amah is a cubit, 20 amot wide. How much is an amah? How much is a cubit? This itself is a moot question. The Shulchan brings this question according to the Gemara, and according to the posek, the rabbis of the Shulchan, an amah or cubit ranges anywhere between 18 inches and about 24. Some say 22, some 24. There are even some who say more than 24. But this is the average range between 18 and 24. It's interesting to note that there's another Shulchan Aruch you can look up, Lahavdil, the Elef Havdalot. Webster's dictionary of the word cubit says 18 inches. The word he got that from, we're sure he didn't learn anything about that. But we said the size of an amah or cubit is about 18 to 24 inches. This refers to many laws of the Torah. For example, the size of tzitzit. The mitzvah of wearing tzitzit is of such major proportions that this is one of the easiest mitzvot that exist, if not the easiest, practically the easiest one, and very inexpensive. But yet the mitzvah of tzitzit is so great that the reward for it is as great as all the other mitzvot combined. You simply put on tzitzit, on your shirt, no effort, no suffering, no bother. It entails no work of any kind, and as you wear it, each 4 steps you take, you receive the credit for all the mitzvot of the Torah. There are 613 mitzvot of the Torah, Hayag mitzvot, and a person has to go through a lot of effort and trouble and sacrifice to perform all these 613 mitzvot. A person could live a full lifetime as a tzadik, but still not get the opportunity to perform all of them. There are certain mitzvot that are dependent upon sacrifices in the holy temple, which we don't have today. Many other mitzvot. Yet a person who wears tzitzit gets the reward, the credit, for having performed all that is equal to the performance of all 613 mitzvot combined. Because the word tzitzit itself is gematria, the letters are numerically valued 600, the 8 strings and 5 knots, total 613, is a symbol showing the importance of this mitzvah. Of course, in order to get this mitzvah, a person must wear tzitzit that are kosher. Kosher means the proper winding of the tzitzit. Any beggar, the garment must be the proper size. Proper size to conform to all the poskim is at least an amah wide, amah long. Here's where we come to the question of the length of an amah. How many inches is an amah? Again, as we said, the minimum is 18 inches. A person who has tzitzit, a beggar that's less than 18 inches wide and long, is performing the mitzvah bedochek. unquestionably. It's that it is so important the person should place enough emphasis on it to see that it is being done properly to get the full credit for it, and that he should not miss out on it for a moment. This mitzvah is to be performed every single day of a person's life. There is no day, holiday, weekdays, where there is an exemption from this mitzvah. The Gemara says that a person that wears tzitzit will be zocher, that it will protect him against the Yetzer Hara. He can more easily combat temptation while wearing it, and he'll be assured of enjoying the Shekhinah afterwards. Now this is we brought this up in reference to this size of Emma. As we said, the Kodesh Kodashim, the room, the Holy of Holies, is 20 amot wide. Taking this into mind consideration, the Gemara says that this was the holiest place in existence. The Arizal shows what is meant by one place being holier than the next. For example, the Gemara says that in Israel itself, there were 10 levels of holiness. Eretz Yisrael is called Eretz HaKodesh, the Holy Land, which means that every other country is a land of Tul'ah, impurity. Eretz Yisrael is holy. Eretz Yisrael itself being holy is not equal in holiness throughout. Yerushalmi is holier than any other place in Eretz Yisrael. So we have there that Yerushalmi, Jerusalem, is holier still than Eretz Yisrael. When we get to Yerushalmi itself, the holiest part of Yerushalmi, holier than any other section, is the place, the area of the Bet HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. In the Holy Temple we have 2 different levels, going higher and higher in holiness till we get to the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies. Now we've established this fact there are different levels. What is the difference between these levels as far, this is in holiness, as far, let's say, as the physical is concerned? Is there any physical difference? Is there any way we can connect these two, physical and spiritual? The answer is that if a place is holy, it begins to leave the earthly rules. There are certain rules that are dictated to on earth that do not exist in heaven. For example, scientifically, physically, we know that there is the law of space, the law of area. If you have an item, a room that is 4 feet wide, in that room you can place something which is 4 feet wide and no more. You cannot put something 5 feet wide into an item that's 4 feet wide. This is one of the laws of space, area. In Eretz Yisrael, being holy, being spiritual, the Gemara says that this leaves the dictates of the laws of space. Eretz Yisrael is a very tiny country, an area, much smaller than most countries on earth. And yet the Gemara tells us that the population there, in Yerushalmi, for example, so small a city, was so great, it was larger than the population of most countries, or all countries on earth today, during the time of the Holy Temple. And the Gemara asks, how is that possible? The Gemara wants to at first ridicule this. How can you say that you have in this small area, these few blocks of Yerushalmi, put in a population as large as that of the whole, let's say, Eastern Hemisphere? It seems to be impossible. The Gemara answers that Eretz Yisrael is comparable to the skin of a deer. If you skin a deer, you find that it's so tiny you can hold it in your hands, the skin. And yet, while it's on the body of the deer, it's so large it can contain the entire deer. It's because it stretches as something is put into it. And that's the nature of Eretz Yisrael. It's holy. The more that go into Eretz Yisrael, the more it can contain. It has unlimited capacity for holding people, for containing population. This is the land of Israel. How about Yerushalmi being less involved, being less governed by the laws of space? We have in Pirkei Avot, where the Mishnah says that it never happened yet. When the Jews of Israel went to visit for the 3 holidays They had to visit the Holy Temple. They were there for a week. Where did they stay? They had to find hotel space, room to sleep the entire week in Yerushalmi. Even says it never happened that a person should ever complain, I cannot find a place to sleep in Yerushalmi. Despite the fact that all the Jews came together there. How could you have all Jews find a place to sleep in Yerushalmi? Because that is still holier and less governed by the laws of space. Going still further, we come to the Holy Temple, the yard of the Holy Temple, the Azarah, where all Jews assembled. And there the Mishnah says that they all stood at attention. They were crammed into this yard. That's only 300 amot. It's less than a city block. All the Jews in existence went into this place. The small area of the yard of the Holy Temple stood there. They were very closely pressed together. That's one miracle. But when the Kohen Gadol announced the name of Hashem, every Jew bowed down, his face to the ground. Bowed completely, which means that he required 6 feet of space. All of a sudden there was 6 feet of space for every Jew to bow. How do you create space out of nothing? This is because the area was so holy that you could fit inside millions of times as much matter as there is space, since it is holy and heavenly. The heavens are not governed by the laws of space at all. When we come to the Holy of Holies, this is like heaven itself. There's no rule of space. No space is necessary. And therefore, the Gemara says that here we had the miracle of spacelessness in this room, because the room was exactly 20 amot wide. This room contained 2 kiruvim, that's 2 angelic forms, 2 birds with the wings spread out, and in between these 2 birds stood the Holy Ark. Now, remember that the room was exactly 20 amot wide. The 2 birds were exactly, let's be exact, literally, to the nth of a degree. The tiniest iota. These 2 birds were exactly 10 amot each. The wings spread. The wings touched. They actually touched, and that they covered the entire width of the room exactly. Not one fraction of an inch was left. Between these 2 birds, which means in 0 space, stood the Holy Ark, which was 2.5 amot wide, or 1.5 wide, depending upon width and length. 1.5 wide is a lot of space to fit into no space at all. This was due to the fact that this was a miracle, and it was not governed by the laws of space at all. This is the miracle of the Aron Kodesh, not requiring space. Second miracle, the Gemara says, this already is debatable. This first item, that the Aron required no space, is factual, agreed upon by all. Second one, there's a debate about. Some say that the kiruvim themselves, that is, the bodies of the kiruvim, were also there by miracle. Because the kiruvim, you said these kiruvim are 2 birds with, they're called cherubs. Kiruvim, in the actual translation of Ruv, an avia is a child. They had the face of a child on it, the wings of a bird, body and wings of a bird. These stood for angels, or stood for the closeness, the friendship between Kaviyahot and Hashem and the Jews. So these 2 birds were there, also stood by miracle. Because, follow this carefully, because the Torah says that they had their wings spread out, and each wing of the bird was exactly 5 amot. Exactly. That means that the total of the wing spread was 10 amot. Now, the wings were 10 amot each one, that covered the entire room. Where was the body of the bird? The body is in between the 2 wings. This means then that the kiruvim also stood in spacelessness. There was no space, and yet they were able to exist. This is the statement of the Gemara, and this statement, of course, is debated by a number of questions. If we take it as we said, there is the body of the bird. On both sides you have extending the wings. We can understand this as a fact. that the wings were exactly 5 amot each, a total of 10. The other one, too, the second bird, too, a total of 10. That's 20 for the wings alone. 2 bodies of the kiruvim were not governed by space at all. They were within zero space. Now the Gemara says, we wish to refute this, or some argue this point, a number of rabbis, by asking simple questions. Simple geometric questions. First question is that who says that these wings extended from the side of the bird? For example, you take a chicken, the wings of a chicken start from the very center of the body of the bird, and they go on, so that the body is beneath the wings, that the entire width of a chicken is the width of its wing spread. And these birds, too, could have had the wings start from the center of the body, with the wings extending 10 amot. Beneath these wings, you had the body, which didn't have to take up space because it was within the same 10 amot. That's one question to disprove this. Second question is that perhaps the birds were standing not in the width of the room, which is 10 amot, but in the diagonal. The room was a square. You had them diagonally, from one opposite corner to the other opposite corner, which would give us approximately 828 amot in width, an extra 8 amot that would cover the space for the bodies of the bird. You have additional 8 amot. If the thing is 20 amot wide, diagonally in a square would come out to about 28 amot, giving enough room for the bodies. The third point is that who says that the 2 wingtips touched? Possible that the one overlapped the other. And if they overlap the other, it would subtract from the width of 20 amot to allow enough room for the 2 bodies. That's why this item is debated in the Gemara. As we said, there are some who maintain, though, that they were situated normally, and that the kiruvim too stood there by miracle, just as did the Holy Ark. Now, what position did they have? That is, their faces. These 2 birds were stationed side by side. Where did their faces point to? The Gemara says that their faces turned towards each other. They faced each other at times, and other times they faced away from each other. If the Kohen would see that they faced each other, he would know this was a sign that Hashem has found favor with the Jews. He likes what the Jews are doing. The Jews are conducting themselves with true allegiance to Hashem, and it is shown by the fact that these 2 birds face each other. If there was chas v'shalom anger on the part of Hashem against the Jews for their actions, then these 2 birds would turn away from each other to show that sign, and this would be a signal for the Kohen Gadol to go out and teach the Jews to do Teshuva. This is the picture of what the Bet HaMikdash, holiest part of the Bet HaMikdash, looked like, and this is what it will look like again. Mashiach comes, one of his first acts is to build the Bet HaMikdash, rebuild the Bet HaMikdash. Of course, it will not be exactly his act, because the Gemara says that the Zohar Kadosh, Mashiach comes, the Bet HaMikdash is being rebuilt, finally, permanently by Hashem. The reason that the Holy Temple was destroyed twice is because it was built by man. Anything man builds cannot endure forever. The third and final Bet HaMikdash will be built by Hashem in a flash of fire, a heavenly fire, and this will last forever and ever. Let's hope, pray, have faith that Mashiach will come now to complete his duty in eradicating completely all evil on earth, to bring all Jews back to Eretz Yisraeli Holy Land, to enjoy the rebuilding of the Bet HaMikdash. Amen.